In this video, we're going to talk about the PPP update, the Paycheck Protection Program update with the Flexibility Act that just got signed into law. And I also have the press release from the Treasury that helps clarify some of the points on the update to the PPP program. But before we do, if this is your first time at our channel or you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button at the bottom. My name is Travis Sickle, Certified Financial Planner, helping you reach your financial goals. So if you haven't seen the update to the PPP program, the Flexibility Act, it's only 3 pages, and I'm going to leave a link in the description at the bottom so you can follow along and read it for yourself. It's pretty easy to read. It's not as long as the CARES Act, thank goodness. But we want to go through these updates because this is huge for the PPP program. So let's go through the press release. There are 7 different points that I want to cover to help clarify, and it's not going to clarify everything, but it'll help you understand a little bit more about what you can do to maximize your forgiveness. And before I do that, there are a lot of questions that I'm getting for independent contractors and how to work with the PPP loan forgiveness. Now, a lot of the guidance still hasn't come out on how it's going to be handled. But as we go through those points, I'll give you some pointers on what you can do if you're an independent contractor or just a Schedule C filer, and you're just kind of in the dark on how to maximize a loan forgiveness as a small business owner. So point number 1 on the press release talks about the 24-week extension. So it is an additional 16 weeks to the original 8. Now you have a choice. You can use the 8 weeks or the 24. Now I can't think of any scenario why you would only want to use the 8 weeks unless you just use 75% already and you just want it to be a done deal. But for most of us, we're going to want to use the full 24 weeks in order to use and maximize the PPP program loan forgiveness. And that is the biggest change that I see to the PPP program. Now, one of the biggest changes also has one of the biggest questions, and that's because originally the CARES Act limits the business owner to only 8 weeks worth of their payroll from 2019. So you couldn't give yourself a bonus or give yourself hazard pay, but you can give it to the employees. Now, being capped at that 8 weeks, just extending it to the 24 also allow you to use the 24 weeks worth of payroll. So you can just use basically 100% for payroll costs and get it 100% forgiven. But that's not explicitly explained or clear just yet. Now, some people might interpret it that way, but it's not clear just yet. So we're going to wait for that guidance and see if they are explicitly clear on it. And it'll probably come in the form of the formula on an updated application or some future guidance. And the second point on that list, which is the second biggest point in my opinion, is going from the 75% for payroll down to 60%. Now, this is going to give a lot of businesses the flexibility they need because a lot of businesses are just different. And the last sentence in this point is totally confusing, and I was hoping that it was going to offer more clarity, but unfortunately it just doesn't. And it says that if a borrower uses less than 60% of the loan amount for payroll costs during the forgiveness covered period, the borrower will continue to be eligible for partial loan forgiveness, subject to at least 60% of the loan forgiveness amount having been used for payroll costs. So right after that last comma, I'm totally confused. Is it a cliff or is it not? Now, I know a lot of other blogs and other YouTubers have been talking about this particular point, whether or not it's a cliff, but hopefully there'll be more guidance to just go ahead and clarify on whether or not it's a cliff or whether or not there's going to be a formula to get a reduced amount of forgiveness. But that, again, is going from 75 to 60%. So it's a huge win for a lot of businesses struggling to figure out how to allocate these dollars. And the next 2 points have to do with 2 safe harbors that were added to the PPP program. Again, making this forgiveness portion a little bit easier. So the first one is looking at providing for a safe harbor for borrowers that are unable to return to the same level of business activity the business was operating at before February 15th, 2020. Now you can almost stop right there because the rest of it's just saying due to compliance with requirements or guidance issues between March 1st and December 31st of 2020. I think almost every single business in the country falls under those parameters. So if you can't get to that same level of business activity, I just don't see a business out there that wouldn't be able to use this safe harbor to their advantage. And that second safe harbor is if you can't rehire your employee or a similarly qualified employee to fill the position. So it's very broad. So it's very broad in not affecting your full-time equivalent reduction. And the only reason I can think that they didn't cross out the full-time equivalent employee section altogether was just to kind of fight against the businesses that might be committing fraud or trying to abuse the system, because it really is so broad at this point that if you can prove that you can't rehire your employee or a full-time equivalent employee, then you're going to get this safe harbor. And the next point talks about going from a 2-year loan to a 5-year loan, which really affects the monthly payments. So it makes it a little bit easier for those monthly payments. And I did some math in the last video if you want to look at it. But going from 2 years to 5 years, that's a big deal for those that are going to use the PPP money as a loan. And the second to last point on the press release talks about the extension of these payments. Now it says that extend the deferral period for borrowers' payments of principal, interest, and fees on the PPP loans to the date that the SBA remits the borrower's loan forgiveness amount to the lender. So that means you're going to fill out the application, which hasn't been out yet, the revised version. You're going to give it to your lender after the 24 weeks is up. They're going to process it, submit it to the SBA. The SBA is going to give it back to the lender and tell them what's approved or not approved. And at that point is when the payments will start. Now, the whole process is going to take forever. It's going to get jammed up. So you have to wait until that all occurs. So that could push us, a lot of small business, into 2022 before you have to start making payments. And at the very least, it's going to be 10 months after the 24-week covered period. So that's what that second part of that bullet says. Or if the borrower does not apply for loan forgiveness, 10 months after the end of the borrower's loan forgiveness covered period. So that's a long time to make your first payment on anything that doesn't get forgiven. And the last point is talking about the reconfirmation that June 30th, 2020, June 30th, that's the end of this month, that the PPP program will stop issuing and getting new approvals. So if you haven't applied, there's still money left, you could still apply. So if you didn't think that you qualified or didn't think that it was right for you for whatever reason under the original guidelines, well, take a second look, go through it and see if it's right for you and put in your application if you need to by June 30th. Do it as fast as you can because the approval process to begin with was ridiculously long. So hopefully that the new applications are a little bit easier to get approved. So if you need it, go get it. And if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave your comments down at the bottom.